What do you got for us this week, Steve?
Uh,
It's just so many ideas. You don't know which one to pick.
I'm perplexed with there's sometimes just an complete disconnect between people, where some things that I think are like so obvious, and other people it's like right over their head.
Yeah.
Despite being given like very clear like guidance, like, hey, and I'm a couple of issues are like I have a team member who I don't think has any idea how disrespectful he is to other people, and it's just fascinating to watch, and to watch it come out in bizarre statements that are like, I can't believe you just said that, because what you're suggesting is you're suggesting that your other teammate do X, Y, and Z, even though that teammate just said, hey, I need to do X, Y, and Z, and I need help delivering that. And I'm like, wow.
They're probably not listening. I mean,
No.
Honestly.
Yeah.
At what point do you think it becomes malicious? Because we've talked about that before, and you always have your famous...
I think this is totally Hanlon's razor.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, that's the one you want to go to.
It is my go-to for 2022. I know it is. I know I use that one. And if those of you haven't been paying attention for the last 8 episodes that I brought this up, it's never account someone's behavior to being malicious when incompetence is the more likely culprit.
Yep.
So,
and I've kind of gone the other way in 2022 and have basically said, especially for like adults, you've had enough time and there's enough information out there that at this point it is malicious. Like, even if it is stupidity, it's weaponized stupidity, in my opinion.
Could be.
Like, I don't know.
I think related to this is through the whole pandemic, where people have been, the complete lockdown of whatever that was, 2019?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it 2020?
Both.
I don't even remember. 2020?
Well, it started as 2020 is when it started. 2020 and 2021, yeah.
And then 2021 was, well, we're going to kind of loosen things up a little bit, but still be cautious, and we're going to have a lot of rules in place. And you got to the point where some people would say, quote, because this is often what they would say, I am so done with this. And my response was, that's fine, but like, everybody has been dealing with this. You have not been singled out and said you need to deal with this and everybody else gets a pass. Everybody has been dealing with it. So when you say I'm so done with it, I get it, but part of me is also like, but you're no different than anybody else, and other people are handling it much better than you.
Yeah.
So are you saying you're an idiot? And that your threshold for doing smart things is less than others, and I think that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
Am I going on a rant that is? You can course correct me if my rant is off base.
No, I think it's the same. Like, those are just people that aren't self-aware. They're just It's like literally all about them, and that's it. They cannot see anything outside of the bubble of their face. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's. I mean, along that front, it's very interesting. Our school district kids are going back to school soon in our district. Put out the new protocols, and it's just like, I mean, it's almost like, why even bother? So one, if you get it, you quarantine for 5 days. But if you are at a house with somebody who gets it, you just go to school like normal, even if you're unvaccinated. So vaccinated or not vaccinated, in the house with somebody who has it, you go to school like nothing happened. If you're exposed at school, the school's not going to make you quarantine. You still go to school, and the school's not going to tell anybody, I think, whether or not it's happening. So it's like we're really, like, you guys are really just trying to sweep all this, like, pretend like it's not a thing. I don't.
That's fascinating. This is sort of like, and I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, finish your thought. I apologize, and then I have a comment.
No, it's fine.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. So back in pre-pandemic, like if and I'll lay the blame on myself. If my child was a little bit sick, it'd be like, go to school, do your thing. You gotta get to school, and they would infect everyone with the flu, and it would run rampant. And then the pandemic came along, and we were like, this is probably the better way to do it. Like, when your child is sick, when my child is sick, I should probably keep them home. And now we haven't learned anything. We're okay saying, go to school.
Yeah, I mean, it's and so this, like, it feels malicious at some point from a group of people that, like, we all know better. So we all know that this has been proven now 2 times from a major pandemic in the last 120 years. Like, we know that wearing masks and staying away from people when you're sick works, period, for basically anything. But we had this really toxic culture in our society where it's like, especially for work, like, you still go to work when you're sick, you send your kid to school when they're sick. Like, it's teaching them, right? They're just trying to teach you how to overwork yourself. And of course, these people that run these organizations that have seen like a 40% growth in profits over the last 2 years don't want that to go away. They don't want people to be like, oh no, like, my health is more important. I mean, at some point, it's like, I think we have to acknowledge that is what's going on. Like, there are people and there are leaders and there are some companies that do the right thing, but it's like the vast majority of these large organizations are like, no, screw you.
I had a person that I interact with whose company does not have a sick policy nor a COVID policy. Therefore, if one takes time off for COVID because you have COVID and you're ill and not feeling well, that comes out of your PTO. And so what this person was wrestling with is, I don't have much PTO, so I'm going to suck it up and just work. And yeah, I'm thinking, how have we missed the boat on this? We've been in the pandemic for 2 years. Every person in HR has been given the opportunity to evaluate this and go, the right thing to do is that if somebody has COVID, give them time off for COVID and not penalize their PTO.
Yeah.
But nope, that's not the case.
No. I was just watching a thing where it's like the United States is like dead last as far as countries that provide paid. It's like it's a 0 across the board in the United States. There are some individual states that have legislation that may like tell companies to do it, but it's like federally, yes, it's not protected.
Right.
here there's no like, and there are some states that have said even if your city does it, they can't do it, and we say no, they can't do it.
Right.
Right.
But I would argue, like, why do you need a state to tell you to do the right thing? But and all this does is reinforce my opinion that human resources is not there to protect the employees at all.
No, never. There are individual HR representatives that do that.
Yes. Yep.
But no,
But as a general rule, they're there to protect the organization and the managers who do dumb stuff.
Yep.
But as far as the regular employees, no.
This is so funny because it's like, I mean, anybody that's been around the block a time or two or had to interact with HR has probably come to this realization. But I had a friend that's just going through some nonsense with has a disability, needed accommodations, talked to the company, went through the whole process, and like finally came to the realization like they're not there to help me. And it's like, yeah, they're not there to help you. I mean, even because of all this, I've had a long time ago at a place that I used to work, I watched a female employee get sexually harassed by a male employee. And I'm like, it made me uncomfortable. So first of all, it made me uncomfortable. It made her uncomfortable. She was completely mortified. I could see the look on her face. And I'm like, look. So I went and talked to him like, hey, you want to go to lunch? And I brought like the operations, one of the like human resource people. I'm like, hey, come to lunch with us. And I'm like, hey, this happened. So we told him in the car, and they're like, all right, we're going to go back. You're going to, because she didn't want to actually report it initially. But after I was like, I saw this, it's not cool. And he was like, yes, we need to figure this out. So we go back, fill out the report. Other employees saw it and also reported it. And so this is an instance where the HR staff, the operations staff, they were cool. They did the right thing. However, and this company had a zero tolerance policy for sexual harassment. I don't know about you, but when I hear that, it means if you do that, you're donezo. You're out the door.
Mm-hmm.
And so apparently all the managers got to meet and decide the fate of this person that did the sexual harassment. And they were going to overlook it. And the only reason they didn't is because his direct manager didn't like him and was like, no, let's get rid of him. But my friend who was a manager, he's like, oh yeah, we totally could have overlooked this because of his sales. I'm like, okay, you can't talk to me right now. I need to cool off. I might throttle you. I'm like, you guys are out of control. This is not cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So like individuals are, good, but it's like, yeah, I'm sure that we could have had a crappy HR representative that didn't support the reporting or, raise that up or anything. But the fact that it went to the managers is just ridiculous to me.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's really funny that you brought this up because it just like has been very topical for me this week.
I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but at another organization I was at, this was years ago, there was an issue in the men's restroom. And on the floor of the building I was on, it was, I don't know, let's say 40 people. And of the 40 people, 35 of them were male and 5 were female. So the men's room and the restrooms were like of equal size, and they weren't big. And we had an issue where one person, we couldn't figure out what was going on. And there were a number of issues that we had over the years that we tried to address, like somebody throwing spitting gum in the urinal and leaving it there. It's like, really? This, you're leaving this for somebody else to clean up, really? Yeah. But one issue was where a person would, apparently, and what we kind of figured out was the person was putting paper towels down on the seat of the toilet to create a barrier between flesh and the toilet seat.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, I get that. But what the person would do is then, like, after finishing, either A, let the paper towels just fall on the floor and not do anything about them, or let them fall into the toilet and then they would clog the plumbing. Okay. This was an ongoing issue, and a couple of us who were, call it passive aggressive, call it just creative marketing, would put up signs like, don't do this, but in kind of a funny, lighthearted way, like, hey, we're not going to make a big deal out of this, but just don't do this. And yet it continued. And so I'm like, well, I wonder what I should do about this, because I would have the employees who reported to me complaining about this. And so I contacted HR, and they were like, well, have you posted any signs? Yes, done that. Well, the next thing I would do is, maybe have an all floor meeting. Okay, fine. And at this point, by the way, we've kind of figured out and narrowed it down who we think it is. We are 95% sure who the one person is. So I call a meeting of all the men on the floor. We go into the main conference room, and everybody knows why we're there. They're like, great, we're going to finally address this problem. And the person who we're pretty sure is the culprit does not attend. And there were, of the 40 people, I think 2 people didn't attend. One, the culprit, and one who was busy, who was one of the main complainers. So I knew it wasn't him, right? And I'm like, I can't believe this. But I give my speech, and I'm like, hey, here's what we need to do, blah, blah, blah. Hoping, okay, maybe the person who's not here is going to ask what was covered, and somebody will be able to say, here's what was covered. And everyone sort of has this grin on their face the whole meeting. Like, they know why we're there. And I'm thinking, okay, this guy, he didn't show up because he's embarrassed. He knows what it's about. We are good now. No, that is not the case. Not sure why the person didn't show up, but it continues to happen. So I go to our supply person on the floor and I say, hey, can we get some of those toilet seat covers, the little papers? And the person says, oh, is this about and this is a woman, by the way. And she says, is this about the issue in the men's room? She knows what's going on. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And I'm like, yes. She goes, I can't. She goes, if I order them for this floor, I have to order them for every floor, and I can't do that. And I'm like, okay. So I go and I talk to the person's manager, a woman, whom I had a great deal of respect for. And she's like, didn't want to do anything about it. How do you know it's him? Blah, blah, blah. And the person, by the way, was a contractor. And she just didn't want anything to do with this. Okay. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'm going to take the bullet. And so I arrange a meeting, one-on-one meeting with the person who I think it is. And I sit him down and I start talking about things, and I am kind of vague about the whole thing, but I'm explaining it. And then finally I say, and because paper towels do not disintegrate in water, they clog the plumbing. And as you've noticed, we've had issues where we've had plugged toilets and had to have somebody come in. And the guy looks at me, and all of a sudden he suddenly gets wide-eyed, and he goes, it's me. I'm the one who's doing that. And I said, I know. And he's like, okay, I will stop doing it. I totally get it now. And that was the last time we had that issue. But what's fascinating about the whole thing is HR didn't want to deal with any of this. The person's manager didn't want to deal with any of it. And he was completely oblivious to it. which means like when I got to the point where I had to like directly say, here's why I don't want you doing this. And by the way, up until that point, we're like 5 minutes into the meeting. He looked completely disinterested in the meeting I was having with him until he finally went, oh my gosh, it's me. Anyway, that story has lived on from that organization for years. To this day, sometimes I will get somebody who says, remember the toilet incident and the paper towels? And I'm like, yes, I remember it. But HR didn't want anything to do with it.
No.
They were about as helpful as a sharp stick in the eye.
Yeah, very sneaky to call it human resources, that's for sure.
Yep.
There's this lady I follow on TikTok, the HR Manifesto, I think is her name. She's been doing it a long time. She's pretty hilarious. And
That's awesome.
She's one I would consider probably to be a good one. She did a thing about quiet quitting, which I kind of hate that name because it's like nobody's really quitting. That's not what's happening. Like people aren't like, oh, I quit. And then not doing anything.
It's drawing the line.
Yeah, I know. Like that's the thing. It's like the fact that it's perceived as quitting is insulting. Yes. And the fact that we have to have sayings like act your wage and stuff like that, like the fact that that concept is completely lost on people to have boundaries, I think just shows like how bad things have been for so long.
Yeah.
And you finally broke a whole generation of people, and we're just like, oh, we've had enough. We're not going to do that anymore. Because it's like, it literally gets them nothing. Like, nobody gets anything out of that. Nothing.
No.
So it's like, why would you keep doing that? You don't get anything. Maybe, other people did, like back in the day. I mean, that was my advice from my grandfather and my father was like, just work really hard, find a place. That doesn't work anymore. You're not going to get taken care of, unfortunately.
No. It's you are considered a disposable resource.
Yeah, which is totally fine. Like I don't think most millennials and beyond, like Gen Z or I don't think they'll care about that. Like it's not like we understand that this is transactional. We don't have to pretend like it's anything more than that. We don't need a place to be all of our communities and have all this stuff for us to do. We don't need that. Like we have, I think, all that stuff outside. But this lady, she goes on to talk about quiet quitting, and she says it's not really quiet quitting. It's loud failing from the organization. Like the reason people have gotten to this point is because the organizations have failed employees over and over and over again, and they've had enough of it. And it's like, yes.
That is awesome. I love that. Loud failing.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good too.
Yep. And I don't know if there is any short-term fix for that. I think it's systemic.
Yeah, I saw somebody today that says the reason that people are pushing back very hard on employees doing that is because corporations aren't sustainable unless people do that, unless they work harder. Organizations aren't going to be able to function. And I'm like, well, I don't know about that. I'll be interested to see that, if that's the case. I don't know if that's true, but I'm all for a good experiment. Like the pandemic was a really good experience, and it's really annoying that we're not implementing any of the things that we learned on that on a wide scale.
Yeah, that is very interesting that you bring that up.
And let's not, that is not specific to the United States. Nobody. The whole entire species is not doing it.
I would agree. Although I have a limited amount of data to support that. Like I'm not Hey, Portugal, give me your stats, fill out this survey monkey thing. But it does seem like we have not learned anything.
Yeah, I mean, it was the fact that, and I can't tell, this is a new thought that I had too. I can't tell if, so I think most people that aren't douches, they do want to look at history and not repeat history. I think there are a number of douchebag people that look at history to redo it on purpose. Like, because I mean, the stuff that happened with the pandemic was like, word for word stuff that happened during the flu pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic. That was crazy to me. So I can't tell if it's like they just thought these thoughts on their own and they're just dumb, or if they went back and looked and they're like, how can I tell people this? And they're like, oh, I'll just say this exact thing. And it's completely applicable.
I think that gives people way too much credit to research that. I think that people are just that stupid. Yeah.
That's super interesting, right? It's like, the whole thing is crazy to me. Just, I mean, you look at, there's somebody that created a social media thing that just went through all the plagues and like explained virology and stuff like that, and how we, like, what the bubonic plague was and how bad the most recent stuff was. So like, was it the bubonic plague? I can't remember if that's the one where virology came from, but it's like the mortality rate was so high, and the first thing where they were blowing like the dead cells into people's noses or whatever reduced the death rate down to like 30%, the mortality rate down to 30%. And then once we got immunizations, we were able to reduce it down to like 3%. But like, the most recent thing, we're talking of a mortality rate between 3 and 5%, and how many people that was. Can you imagine, like, if 30% just like gone?
Yep.
How bad that would be?
Don't confuse me with the facts, though, that don't support my narrative.
It is, I gotta tell you, it's super interesting, like, living in this time, right? Because it wasn't until 1996 that we'd actually seen a planet outside of our own solar system. That's crazy. That we'd never actually seen one. We thought that they were there, but we didn't know. And so we live in this time now where our understanding and our technology help us explain things so quickly, and you just see these people that can't let go of their ideologies until they get into this tiny box where they're just insane, because it's like and then it gets so small that they start breaking their own rules, but they can't even see that they're doing that. It doesn't even register to them.
No.
That they're like, I just said this last week and now I don't care about it. It's super fascinating, really irritating.
We are quite the species, aren't we?
Yeah, I saw a video of an ape looking at Instagram on a smartphone.
Really?
And I did not appreciate that. I did not like that. Because it looks just like us. Like, it's doing the same stuff. And it knew how to do it too. That was the other, like, it knew exactly what it was doing.
Wow. Well, maybe we should be doing something different. Maybe we should be doing something better.
Yeah.
Well, my end game, pie in the sky, if I won the lottery, I would just hope that I could become an influencer. No. And there you have it. That is my closing statement for the evening.
Steve's ultimate goal is to be an influencer.